All right, let's get into it. Think about it. We all travel, right? Every single day. We're hopping in a car, catching a bus, maybe jumping on a plane. But have you ever really stopped to think about the hidden world of choices and consequences that are packed into every single one of those trips? Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to explore the unseen ethics of our daily travel. So let me just ask you this straight up. Is your daily commute an ethical act? I know, it sounds like a kind of a weird question, but the way we get from point A to point B, well, it's actually loaded with moral decisions, whether we even realize it or not. Because, it's not just about getting to work on time or going to see your friends. Every single trip we take is a small part of this massive, incredibly complex system. And inside that system are these huge questions about fairness, about who gets access, who gets left behind, and frankly, what kind of world we're creating for ourselves and for the future. Now, to really get the dilemmas, we first have to understand the incredible promise of mobility. I mean, at its best, transportation is this powerful, life-changing gateway to opportunity. And that brings us to this key idea, social inclusion. Now, this isn't just some academic buzzword. It's the core concept that being able to move around freely is absolutely fundamental to being able to participate fully in life, in the economy, in our communities, the whole shebang. And this leads to a really powerful ethical principle, the idea that mobility isn't a perk or a luxury, but a basic human right. And if you accept that, well, then it follows that society, and that means all of us, has a moral duty to make sure everyone can get around, especially the folks who are most vulnerable. Then what does that access really unlock? Oh, just about everything. We're talking about the ability to get to a good job or school, to see a doctor when you're sick, to buy fresh groceries, to just connect with family and friends. When you add it all up, mobility is directly tied to our overall satisfaction with life. So you see, it is so much more than just travel. Okay, so that's the ideal. But what happens when that promise is broken? Who are the people who get left behind when our transportation systems just don't live up to that ideal? Well, the hard reality is that huge barriers still exist for a lot of people. Our infrastructure can be a nightmare for the elderly or for people with disabilities to navigate. The high cost of a bus pass can put public transport totally out of reach for low-income families and young people. And yeah, social and cultural factors can create real disadvantages for women and for ethnic minorities too. In fact, there's a specific name for this: transportation racism. It's a term that describes how, systemically, transportation planning and policy have often just failed to serve the needs of racial minorities, which in turn creates and even deepens inequality. Think about it like this. A new highway gets built and it plows right through a minority neighborhood, disrupting a whole community, while a wealthier, whiter neighborhood gets a quiet bypass. It's a really powerful way to understand these deep-seated problems. But the social costs, they're only one part of this big, complicated equation. We also have to face the enormous environmental toll of all our constant motion. And this damage is happening on two different scales at the exact same time. On the local level, right in our own neighborhoods, we feel it as air pollution, as noise pollution from busy roads and railways. But then you zoom out, and on a global scale, those very same emissions are a major contributor to climate change, and that disrupts everything from wildlife habitats to global biodiversity. So just how big is this impact? Get a load of this. The transport sector is responsible for a staggering 25%. That's a full quarter of all global CO2 emissions. That is an enormous piece of the climate change pie, and it really puts the choices we make about how we travel into sharp perspective, doesn't it? Now, some parts of this are more complicated than others. Let's take aviation. While it accounts for about 2.5% of global CO2, its total impact on global warming is actually estimated to be much higher, closer to 4%. Why? Well, it's because of all these other complex effects happening way up in the atmosphere. It's a perfect example of how the ethical math isn't always simple. So you've got this social inequality on one hand and massive environmental damage on the other. This brings us to the ultimate question, right? Who's responsible? Who is actually in the driver's seat here, steering us toward a better, more ethical future? Well, the answer isn't simple. It's layered. At the very top, you have governments and planners. They're the ones setting the rules and designing the systems. Then you've got the corporations in the industry, the car makers, the airlines, the bus companies. They build and run all the services. And finally, there's us, individuals. We're the ones making daily choices within the system we've been given. All three of these layers have a critical role to play. And if we zoom in on that corporate layer for a second, you see some really specific challenges. For private companies, it often just doesn't make financial sense to serve less profitable rural areas, and that creates these big service gaps. The same goes for green innovation. It can be super expensive, and internally, the industry really struggles with a lack of diversity in leadership, which means the people making the big decisions don't always reflect the communities they're supposed to be serving. So we're left with this one last question, and it's the one that sits at the very heart of this whole conversation. If we could just redesign our travel from the ground up and put ethics right at the core, what would that journey for everyone truly look like? That's something worth thinking about the next time you head out the door.